face pressed between the pages of my mind.
August 16th, 1977. Memphis woke to a heavy summer sun, unaware the world was about to lose its brightest star. Behind the gates of Graceland, Elvis Presley, idol, rebel, legend, fought battles no audience ever witnessed. Years of pain and illness had worn him down, but the public saw only the glittering jumpsuits and electric stage presence. That morning, in the quiet of his private sanctuary, the king of rock and roll faced his final hour. He wouldn't die in front of thousands of adoring fans, but alone, in front of thousands of adoring fans, but alone, in silence. Prepare yourself for the truth his doctor will reveal. His last hour. The Memphis heat pressed down hard that Tuesday morning, thick and unrelenting, the kind of weather that made even the air feel heavy. Inside Graceland, though, the mansion stood still, cocooned in silence. Upstairs, the man who had once electrified arenas with a single hip shake drifted through another sleepless night. Elvis Presley was a creature of late hours. His days blurred into nights, his body clock wound tightly around a rhythm only he could keep. When others were waking, he was usually settling down. But on the morning of August 16, 1977, there was no settling. There was restlessness, an unease he couldn't shake. He had spent much of the night with Ginger Alden, the young fiancée who shared his world of guarded privacy. They talked, read, and lingered in the sanctuary of his bedroom suite. Concert dates loomed, but Elvis's body wasn't ready for the stage. His voice, though still powerful, was carried by a frame weakened by illness, medication, and years of strain. Fans would see the glittering jumpsuits. What they wouldn't see was the exhaustion that clung to him when the lights went dark. Sometime after 9 a.m., Elvis rose. He told Ginger he was going into the bathroom. It was nothing unusual. His health had turned such visits into long, solitary battles. Pain made him disappear behind that door often for stretches that blurred minutes into hours. Ginger stayed behind, expecting him to return as he always did. But time began to stretch. 10 minutes, 20. The silence grew heavier, pressing in with each tick of the clock. At first, she tried to dismiss it. Elvis needed his privacy, and he guarded it fiercely. Yet something about the stillness unsettled her. Finally, she crossed the room, her heart quickening as she pushed open the bathroom door. The sight froze her. Elvis lay face down on the tiled floor, pajamas twisted, his body sprawled awkwardly as though caught mid-motion. His skin was pale, his chest unmoving. The king of rock and roll, who had once commanded crowds with effortless vitality, now looked frighteningly fragile, heartbreakingly human. She cried out his name, rushing to his side, her voice breaking. She shook him, called his name again and again, but there was no response. Panic surged. She shouted for help, her screams cutting through Graceland's quiet halls. His doctor was called in. Chaos erupted. They tried to roll him over to find signs of life. Desperate hands attempted resuscitation, but the truth lingered in the air before anyone spoke it out loud. His body was limp, his face ashen, his breath gone. Still, hope clung stubbornly, and an ambulance was summoned. Paramedics arrived, lifting his frame onto a stretcher, racing against time, though most knew it was already too late. Graceland's gates swung open as the ambulance roared down Elvis Presley Boulevard toward Baptist Memorial Hospital. Fans waiting outside for a glimpse of their idol had no idea they were witnessing his final journey. Inside the emergency room, doctors worked with frantic urgency. They tried everything: compressions, injections, electric shocks, but the damage was irreversible. After long, painful minutes, the inevitable was declared. At 3:30 p.m., Elvis Aaron Presley, son of Tupelo, Mississippi, global icon, and the king of rock and roll, was gone. He was just 42. News broke like a thunderclap. Radios interrupted programming. Television anchors stumbled through announcements. Outside Graceland, the trickle of fans swelled into thousands, their grief pouring into the hot Memphis streets. Around the world, phones rang, tears fell, and disbelief echoed in living rooms from London to Tokyo. The man who had changed music forever was no more. But as the world mourned, questions took shape. Had Elvis died from a substance overdose, as so many whispered, or had something deeper been at play? An illness hidden from the public eye, a body worn down by years of pain. In the weeks and years that followed, Rumors swirled and speculation grew. Yet behind the noise, one man, his personal physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, would step forward, and in time, he would reveal the truth about what really killed Elvis Presley. At Baptist Memorial Hospital, as the official word of Elvis's death rippled outward, another story was unfolding behind closed doors. The doctors and coroner knew the world would demand answers, and fast. How had the king of rock and roll, just 42 years old, collapsed so suddenly? The auto spy. The body was transferred quietly from the hospital to the morgue. Outside, television cameras and reporters gathered in a frenzy, straining for scraps of information. Inside, Shelby County medical examiners prepared for an autopsy that would be scrutinized unlike any other in American history. Every scalpel cut, every finding, every note would be weighed against the myth of Elvis Presley. The procedure revealed what some suspected and others refused to believe. Elvis's body was in far worse shape than his public persona ever allowed. His heart was twice the size it should have been. His arteries showed the kind of clogging and hardening seen in much older men. There were signs of long-term disease, of a body ravaged not just by lifestyle but by illness. And then there were the substances. Blood samples revealed traces of numerous prescription medications, painkillers, sedatives, tranquilizers, some at therapeutic levels, others in amounts that raised alarm. To the doctors, this wasn't shocking. Elvis had been under heavy medical care for years, and his reliance on prescriptions was well known in his inner circle. But to the outside world, the combination was explosive. Word leaked before the Presley family could control it. Headlines shouted, "Substance overdose." Tabloids seized the story and ran wild. To grieving fans, it was almost unbearable. How could their idol, the man who had embodied vitality and rebellion, be reduced to a cautionary tale of pills and excess? But inside the Presley family, decisions were made that would fuel decades of speculation. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, ordered that the full autopsy report be sealed for 50 years. Only a limited summary was released to the press, confirming cardiac arrhythmia as the cause of death, but leaving out the complicated details. The official explanation was that Elvis's heart had simply given out. The sealing of the autopsy only deepened the mystery. What was being hidden? Was it truly just a heart attack, or had the substances killed him? Fans debated, conspiracy theories flourished, and the legend of Elvis's final hours grew darker with each passing year. Doctors close to the case tried to clarify, but their voices were drowned out by the noise of rumor. Some insisted Elvis had died from a massive heart attack, his cardiovascular disease so advanced that it was inevitable. Others whispered that the substances, whether prescribed or misused, had been the true culprit. The truth was more complicated, resting in the gray space between those two narratives. His heart was undeniably damaged, his arteries blocked, his health collapsing from years of decline. But the cocktail of medications in his system could not be ignored either. They hadn't caused his illness, but they may have worsened it. For fans outside the hospital walls, none of this mattered that day. All they knew was that Elvis was gone. They sang his songs through their tears, held vigils by candlelight, and pressed flowers against the gates of Graceland. But for the Presley family and for Elvis's personal physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, the story of what truly killed the king was far from over. In the years ahead, Dr. Nick, as he was known, would speak publicly, defending himself against accusations and revealing a startling truth. Elvis Presley, he argued, had not simply overdosed. He had been living for years with a chronic, debilitating illness that no one on. Dr. Nick speaks out. In the days following Elvis Presley's death, one name began to circulate almost as much as the king's: Dr. George Nicopolis. To the world, he was simply Dr. Nick, Elvis's personal physician, the man who had been by his side through the final decade of his life. To Elvis himself, he was more than a doctor. He was a confidant, a guardian, and sometimes the only person who understood the depth of his suffering. But in the storm of speculation that followed, Dr. Nick quickly became the villain of the story. Reporters painted him as the supplier who kept Elvis hooked on pills. Tabloids branded him reckless, enabling, corrupt. To grieving fans, it seemed easier to believe their hero had been betrayed by a greedy doctor than to accept that Elvis's body had been failing long before. For a time, Dr. Nick stayed silent. He let the rumors swirl, the headlines scream, the accusations mount. But eventually he began to speak, and what he said reframed Elvis's decline not as a tale of indulgence, but as one of chronic, crippling illness. Elvis wasn't a junkie, Dr. Nick insisted in interviews and later in courtrooms. He was a sick man, a very sick man. He revealed details that had been hidden from the public, medical conditions that Elvis had struggled with for years. Chief among them was a disorder so unglamorous, so private, that it had never been spoken of beyond the tight circle inside Graceland: megacolon. Elvis's colon, Dr. Nick explained, was abnormally enlarged, nearly twice the size of a healthy adult's. This condition caused severe constipation, bloating, and pain so intense it could leave him doubled over. For Elvis, it wasn't just discomfort. It was a daily battle that shaped his eating habits, his energy, even his moods. By the mid-1970s, it had grown so severe that he required near-constant medication just to function. But the colon disorder was only one piece of the puzzle. Dr. Nick cataloged the rest: diabetes, which left Elvis fatigued and vulnerable; glaucoma, which required ongoing treatment; hypertension and an enlarged heart, which made every performance physically dangerous; and the visible weight fluctuations, driven by both illness and the prescription substances required to manage it all. The image of Elvis on stage in those glittering jumpsuits hid the truth of a man who was, in Dr. Nick's words, held together with medicine. The prescriptions that critics accused Dr. Nick of handing out recklessly, he defended as necessary for a patient drowning in pain. He said he never gave Elvis anything he didn't need. He tried to keep him alive. To him, the pills weren't indulgence, they were survival. But his defense didn't stop the backlash. In 1918, Dr. Nick was indicted on charges of overprescribing substances, accused of fueling Elvis's addiction and contributing to his death. The trial was a media circus, every headline splashed with the king's name. Prosecutors painted a picture of a doctor recklessly filling bottles to please a demanding superstar. Yet in the courtroom, the narrative shifted. Witnesses testified about Elvis's real medical problems, the pain that had plagued him, the long list of ailments that required constant attention. The jury listened, and in the end, Dr. Nick was acquitted. The court accepted that Elvis had indeed been sick, and that the medications, while heavy, were prescribed in a desperate attempt to manage his deteriorating health. Still, public opinion remained divided. For many, Dr. Nick was forever the doctor who gave Elvis too many pills. But for those who knew the singer's private reality, his testimony rang true. Elvis Presley wasn't destroyed by excess alone. He was a man caught in the grip of multiple chronic illnesses, trying to keep performing while his body quietly betrayed him. Dr. Nick's revelations opened the door to a new understanding, that behind the rhinestones and fame was a fragile man whose suffering had been hidden from the world. And as more medical evidence came to light in the years that followed, it became harder to ignore that the king had been waging a losing battle against his own body long before that fateful morning in 1977. The catalog and impact of Elvis's health issues. When fans thought of Elvis Presley, they thought of vitality, the curled lip, the swiveling hips, the voice that could shake an auditorium to its foundation. He was fire on stage, larger than life, the very definition of energy and youth. But by the mid-1970s, behind Graceland's gates, the reality was starkly different. Elvis was living in a body that was breaking down piece by piece, ravaged by illnesses that most never knew existed. Perhaps the most dangerous enemy lived in his chest. Elvis's heart was enlarged, nearly twice its normal size. It strained against hardened arteries, its walls thickened from years of high blood pressure and stress. By 1977, his cardiovascular system resembled that of a man decades older. His doctors knew it. Every checkup carried warnings. But Elvis pushed on, insisting on tours, late nights, the grueling schedule that had once fueled him. On stage, adrenaline masked the truth. Offstage, fatigue dogged his every step. It was the condition no one spoke of, the one that made Elvis human in a way his myth never allowed. For years, he battled severe constipation, the result of an abnormally enlarged colon. This wasn't a simple digestive quirk, it was megacolon, a disorder that caused food to move sluggishly, leaving him bloated, in pain, and often unable to function. Those who worked closest to him knew the signs. The long, solitary hours in the bathroom, the meals left unfinished, the discomfort that shadowed his performances. It was humiliating, too. The king of rock and roll, reduced to the most basic, painful of struggles. To the public, he seemed aloof, erratic, sometimes temperamental. Few realized those moods were born of constant, grinding pain. Layered on top of this was diabetes, a condition that robbed him of energy and made every bite of food a balancing act. Elvis loved rich Southern meals, the fried chicken, the biscuits, the peanut butter and banana sandwiches grilled in butter. But his body couldn't process it anymore. His blood sugar spiked, his weight climbed, and exhaustion became a daily companion. By the final years, he often felt drained before the day even began. Then there were his eyes. Elvis suffered from glaucoma, an eye disease that builds pressure inside the eye and threatens vision if untreated. The medications helped preserve his sight but came with side effects, fatigue, dizziness, sometimes nausea. Photographs from the 70s show the difference. Gone was the sharp, clear-eyed look of the 50s heartthrob. In its place, a heavier gaze, often veiled by tinted glasses to shield him from the harshness of stage lights. Elvis's once slim frame thickened over the years. The jumpsuits that had once accentuated a lean figure had to be redesigned, expanded to fit his changing body. It wasn't just vanity. His weight carried consequences. The extra pounds strained his heart, worsened his blood pressure, and made movement harder. Coupled with his megacolon and diabetes, his diet became both comfort and curse. The foods that reminded him of home were slowly poisoning him. Beyond the medical charts and diagnoses, there was another weight Elvis carried, the weight of being Elvis Presley. The demands of fame, the need to keep performing, the image to uphold. Fans wanted the king, not the man, and so he gave them the king night after night, even as his body faltered. In the private halls of Graceland, he often needed full-time nursing care. Nurses monitored him, medications were dispensed at precise intervals, and still the illnesses marched forward. By the last years of his life, Elvis was rarely free from pain or discomfort. He would wake bloated, heavy, often short of breath. Headaches pounded, his vision blurred, his energy vanished in waves. To cope, he leaned on the medications prescribed by Dr. Nick, pills to wake him, pills to calm him, pills to numb the pain. From the outside, it looked like reckless indulgence. From the inside, it was survival. Elvis Presley was not a man undone by one fatal flaw. He was undone by a body that failed him in multiple ways, a cascade of chronic conditions that no one illness could fully explain. Each one fed into the other. The heart weakened by weight and hypertension, the weight worsened by diabetes and digestive issues, the digestive issues managed with medications that carried their own risks. It was a vicious cycle, and Elvis was trapped in the middle. And yet, through it all, he tried to keep being Elvis, the entertainer, the king. He walked on stage, rhinestones glittering, voice thundering, even when his legs felt unsteady and his stomach churned with pain. He carried the myth for as long as his body would allow, but no man, not even Elvis Presley, could carry it forever. The role of the prescription. The story of Elvis Presley's final years cannot be told without opening the small orange bottles that lined his bedside. To the outside world, those pills became a scandal, the shorthand explanation for his decline. Elvis overdosed, the tabloids screamed. It was a simple, salacious headline, but the truth, as Dr. Nick and others would argue, it was far more complicated. By the mid-70s, Elvis was living with a litany of chronic illnesses: megacolon, glaucoma, diabetes, hypertension, and enlarged heart. Each condition came with its own treatment plan, its own prescriptions. One medication for blood pressure, another to regulate blood sugar, something to ease the colon spasms, eye drops for glaucoma, and still more to manage the relentless pain and fatigue that followed him. To function, Elvis needed a pharmacy's worth of medicine. Mourning often began with stimulants to help him wake up, shake off the fog, and prepare for the day. Concerts demanded energy, and adrenaline alone was no longer enough. Painkillers dulled the stomach cramps and headaches. Anti-anxiety medications softened the sharp edges of stress. Dr. Nick kept careful track, balancing dosages, adjusting prescriptions, but from the outside it looked like excess. By some counts, Elvis was taking upward of a dozen different medications daily, sometimes more. To his critics, that was evidence of addiction. To his doctor, it was evidence of a body that had simply broken down. The trouble with prescription substances is the thin line between medical necessity and dependency. For Elvis, the line blurred years before his death. His tolerance increased, requiring stronger or more frequent doses to achieve the same relief. A pill that had once dulled the pain became less effective, so dosages climbed. It wasn't misuse in the classic sense. He wasn't chasing high, sneaking substances for pleasure. He was chasing normalcy, the ability to perform, to face fans, to get through another day without collapsing. But dependency is dependency, whether born of desperation or indulgence. After his death, the autopsy revealed the presence of multiple substances in his system: codeine, Valium, Demerol, morphine, and others. For reporters, it was enough to declare an overdose. The nuance that the substances were prescribed, that they were taken in therapeutic ranges, that his heart disease alone could have killed him, was lost in the headlines. The Presley family's decision to seal the full autopsy report only deepened suspicion. If Elvis hadn't overdosed, why hide the details? The secrecy fed the narrative that his final years were consumed by reckless pill-taking, a superstar undone by his own lack of control. Dr. Nick spent the rest of his life fighting against that version of the story. He argued that Elvis's substance use wasn't about pleasure, but about pain management. He insisted he never gave Elvis anything he didn't need. He pointed to the mountain of diagnoses, the medical charts filled with evidence of real illness. The pills weren't luxuries. They were necessities to keep a man ravaged by disease on his feet. And yet, even he admitted that the sheer volume of prescriptions created risks. Some substances interacted dangerously with others. Sedatives could slow the heart. Painkillers could depress breathing. Combined with Elvis's already fragile heart, the margin for error was slim. It may not have been an intentional overdose, but the cocktail of medicines certainly placed him on a razor's edge. What makes this chapter of Elvis's story so tragic is not just the medicine itself, but how it shaped his legacy. Fans who once saw him as untouchable came to view him as another celebrity cautionary tale. The king of rock and roll overdosed on the toilet. That was the cruel shorthand that reduced a complex life to a punchline. But inside Graceland, the truth looked different. Elvis was a man who couldn't eat without pain, couldn't sleep without medicine, couldn't stand before a crowd without the help of stimulants. The pills weren't the cause of his sickness. They were the scaffolding that held him up as long as possible. In the end, the role of prescription substances in Elvis's death wasn't black and white. They weren't the sole cause, nor were they blameless. They were part of a larger tragedy. A sick man fighting to maintain his myth, a doctor trying to balance relief with risk, and a public too eager for simple explanations. Alternative theories about Elvis's death. The official story was sparse. Elvis Presley had died of cardiac arrhythmia, a sudden failure of his already fragile heart. It was true, but it was also unsatisfying. How could the most electrifying performer of a generation, just 42 years old, collapse without warning? The Presley family's choice to seal the full autopsy report only deepened the mystery. Fans, reporters, even medical professionals wanted more. And when clear answers didn't come, theories rushed in to fill the silence. The first and most enduring claim was that Elvis overdosed. Toxicology results, though never fully released to the public, leaked in fragments. They showed high levels of prescription substances in his system: codeine, barbiturates, sedatives. Some were at therapeutic levels, others exceeded safe ranges. The sheer number of prescriptions Elvis relied on gave the overdose story power. By the mid-19, his daily regimen included stimulants, painkillers, tranquilizers, and sleeping aids. For critics, it was an open and shut case. Too many pills, too often, until the body simply gave up. But the truth was more complex. Elvis's heart was severely diseased, enlarged to nearly twice its normal size. His arteries enlarged to nearly twice its normal size. His arteries were hardened and narrowed. Even without the substances, doctors later said a fatal cardiac event was inevitable. The medications may have played a role, but they were not the whole story. Still, the overdose narrative was easy to print and dramatic to read, and so it became the version the public remembered first. Then came a theory rooted in the intimate, uncomfortable details of Elvis's final moments. He had been found collapsed in his bathroom, and post-mortem examinations confirmed what insiders had known for years. Elvis suffered from chronic constipation and an abnormally enlarged colon. The bathroom theory suggested that straining to move his bowels might have triggered a heart attack. On one level, it seemed almost absurd, a superstar brought down by something so ordinary. Yet it fits the medical facts. His colon was nearly twice the size of a healthy adult's, a result of years of digestive troubles. Though no coroner ever listed straining as the official cause, the theory stuck. It was humiliating, even tragic, but it offered an oddly human explanation. Elvis hadn't been felled by decadence or mystery substances, but by the same bodily frailty that humbles everyone. Decades later, medical researchers proposed another possibility, that Elvis suffered from a hereditary condition called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. This genetic disorder weakens the liver and lungs, leading to fatigue, infections, and gradual decline. Some biographers argued it could explain many of Elvis's recurring health struggles, from his exhaustion to his digestive issues. There were also darker, more sensational stories. Some whispered that Elvis had been deliberately overprescribed by those around him, that his death was convenient for people who benefited from his estate. Others went further, spinning tales of shadowy figures silencing him. But these were whispers without evidence, rooted more in the culture of celebrity conspiracy than in fact. No investigation ever substantiated foul play. Still, the rumors fed tabloids for years and deepened the aura of mystery. For some, though, no medical explanation mattered at all. Almost immediately after his death, rumors spread that Elvis hadn't died in Memphis that morning. Fans claimed to spot him alive in airports and diners, even driving pickup trucks in small towns. They pointed to evidence, inconsistencies in the spelling of his middle name on his tombstone, secrecy around his autopsy, even the claim that the body in the coffin didn't look quite like him. None of it stood up to scrutiny. But for those unwilling to let go, the Elvis Lives theory offered comfort. It was easier to believe that the king had staged his own escape from fame than to accept he was gone forever. The conspiracy gained such traction that years later, people were still reporting Elvis sightings. It became less about proof and more about longing, the idea that he might still be out there somewhere, free from the prison of celebrity. What these theories, overdose, bathroom strain, genetic illness, fake death, even foul play, reveal is not just uncertainty about Elvis's passing, but the world's refusal to accept it at face value. Elvis wasn't just another entertainer. He embodied an era, a dream, a myth. For millions, he seemed larger than life, untouchable. To accept that he had died in such an ordinary, painful way was almost impossible. And so people searched for other explanations, each one offering a story they could cling to. The truth was far less tidy. Elvis Presley was a man whose body had been failing for years, worn down by chronic illness, weighed down by medications that both helped and harmed him. His death wasn't the result of a single cause, but the collapse of a system pushed beyond repair. And yet, the alternate theories endure, because they keep him alive in conversation, because they soften the blow of reality, because the world never wanted to imagine the king brought low by something as simple and as human as sickness. Even in whispers about secret illnesses, hidden ailments like his glaucoma, or far-fetched tales of conspiracies, the world clings to narratives that make his death feel less ordinary. They reflect not just curiosity, but a refusal to see Elvis as vulnerable. In truth, he was both larger than life and tragically human, a man whose fame could never shield him from the frailties of the body. And so the speculation lives on, keeping his final hours forever wrapped in mystery.